Okay, hello and welcome to class training today. We'll be going through intake, how to intake clients to class, a couple of those different systems, and the triage system. I'm just stalling for a little while, just while we get a few more people connecting to the session and maybe connecting to their audio as well. Okay, my name is Samuel Martin. I will be your presenter today. But before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the country, excuse me, and the different traditional owners of the lands of this vast continent and collection of islands, over 500 different nations. I'm currently on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I myself have a connection to the lands of the Awabakal people. However, all of the First Nations peoples of these lands deserve our respects, and I'd like to take this chance to pay those respects now. I'd like to make special mention of elders, whether they be present, past, present, or emerging, and I'd like to note that these lands were never ceded and that sovereignty has never been extinguished. I'd also like to mention an article I recently read about Indigenous business, which is one of the good news stories rather than the more common bad news stories that we hear. That article is called The Power of Indigenous Business. Sorry, it's called The Power of the Indigenous Business Sector, and you should be able to find it by searching Pro Bono Australia Indigenous Business. Okay, our facilitator for today is Alex Ariti. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Sam. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks.
That's good.
So just a little housekeeping. So this software won't allow you to unmute. If you have questions, you can submit those in the questions section of your control panel. This session is being recorded. If you want to watch it or have stuff you would like to see it, it will be available on our website within about a week. Okay. So today we're going through intake and triage. So there's a couple of different intake systems in class. We'll be going through both of those, and then the triage system, we'll be having a pretty in-depth look at that as well. We've got a couple of other things on the schedule for today, but I'll get to those a bit later. Okay, so we'll start with the new intake system, and then we'll go through the alternate intake system, and I will go through the differences between those. Then I'll go through the triage system with you. Okay, so starting with the new intake system. So this is the recommended system of intaking clients into class, and even just services for existing clients. Anytime you need to add a client or a service to class, the recommended process is using the new intake process. There is a second process which we'll come to later today. So the new intake process, it's a little bit lengthy, but the reason that this version of the process is recommended is that the conflict check is included in this process at step 3 of the process, which is the reason why it is the recommended process. Okay, so let's go and have a look at the new intake process and how it works. So here we are in class. We've just logged into class. Okay, so the new intake system and how to find it is pretty self-explanatory. As soon as you log in, it's that second button there, new intake. We just click that, and that will load up a new intake for us, so that we can begin a new one. Okay, so obviously some of the things that are required here are fairly self-explanatory. Let me skip back to my slide. So this is the service details at step 1 of the process. So we're entering the details for the service that we're delivering here. However, we actually want to enter some details for the client as well. But we'll start at the start, the service details. So obviously the first thing required is the service type. I'm not going to go into that too much right now. I'm going to select a triage, and I'll probably explain why a bit later. Now, once you set your service type to triage, you can, you don't have to, but you can if you want to select a priority level for this service. If this is a high priority service, then you can set that in here, and we'll see a bit later what that does. So then our funding categories are required. I've got a bunch of fields here, but we won't go through all of them. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to choose a funding category. We're not doing a training session on funding categories today. And I've got all of our other. One of the fields we might want to look at here is the assigned to field. If you want to assign this service to a particular staff member, you can do that here. I will quickly do this and assign this to myself. Okay, so moving on to the client details. So we do have to enter what type of client this is. The majority of the time that's going to be an individual. Occasionally throughout the sector that will be an organisation or one of these other options. We'll choose individual there, and this name that I'm entering may be familiar to some of you if you've seen some of my training sessions before. For anyone who doesn't know, we've got the date of birth fields here. There are two of them. The date of birth types, this is whether you know the client's date of birth or not. If you do, that field is then required. If you don't know the client's date of birth, which it's entirely possible you may not, you can select either unknown or not stated. That will remove that date of birth field and we can move on. The rest of these fields are fairly self-explanatory. I will come back to some of those a bit later, but that's to do with other things. Okay, so that's basically step one of the new intake process, the service details, along with the details of the service, the basic details of the service. We do need to enter some client, or we should enter. You don't actually need to. Well, you do need to enter the client type, but that's about it. I will actually just pop that in there. We may not see that later, but just in case we do, you can enter intake notes as well if you like. Okay, so once we've finished with step one of the intake process, we want to move on to step two, and we can do that by clicking this button, which will take us to the additional parties. Excuse me while I just fill that out. We've just set that up. For some reason, we were testing something, so anyway, ignore that. Okay, so now we're at step two of the intake process, managing additional parties. So this is fairly basic and straightforward. If we have additional parties, we can click the Add Party button to add them in. Now, once we get in here, again, you'll need to choose the type of additional party this is, whether that be the other party in the matter. This may be a related party. Some of this is test stuff. You can ignore some of those options there. Again, you will have to select what type of person this is. If you're setting up an additional party, again, we'll just go with individual. And for demonstration purposes, I'm going to skip the rest of those, but normally you would fill in the name and whatever other information you have on your additional party. And once you've done that, you've got a couple of options. You can click Save. I'm not sure I would recommend that button. We've got a couple of others. Save and New and Save and Close. If you've only got the one additional party, I'd recommend the Save and Close button. If you've got multiple additional parties, I'd recommend the Save and New button. If you do click that, that will just bring up a brand new one of those, and you can move on to your next additional party. The classic example we give of why this button will be useful is if you have a bunch of related parties. If you need to enter all of the children of your primary client in as additional parties, and your client has several kids, you can fill in the details for one of them, hit Save and New, do the next one, hit Save and New until they are all in, and then you can hit Save and Close, and that will list your additional parties. Once you have, you can then conflict check those additional parties by clicking that button on the left there. I didn't enter a name. If I had, it would have carried across. you can simply click search then, and that will do a conflicts check for you. I'm just going to close this because we're doing conflict checking next, and we'll go through that in more detail then. So once we've finished with our additional parties and step 2 of the intake process, we can click intake step 3, that button right there. Excuse me. And as I was saying before, this step of the process is the conflict check, which is a part of the process. It's included as part of the process. So this is carried across the name that I entered for the primary client at step 1 of the intake process. So all I need to do now is click search. So now I'm going to explain what I'm really doing here. So I set the service type for this as a triage service. The reason I did that is that this demonstration is basically what you do this is what you could do if you want to enter a brand new client into the system. So this is someone who's called up, you may have run a conflict check on them using the button over here. Haven't found them, they're a brand new client, you haven't seen them before, or maybe you've asked them, have you had a service from us before? No, they haven't, so you enter them in, you put them in the triage system. So when we get to, so this is our example here today. So when you get to this step of the intake process, step 3, okay, what we do is we've got other clients, so we need to check, is this this client, and perhaps it'll be the date of birth field or something that shows you that this is not any of these clients, but a client with the same name, but just it's a different person with the same name. So what you would do in that case is you would say, this is not an existing client, there's no conflict found, so we want to click Save Service. So we'll click that. And that will save the service into the triage list for us, and we'll see that again a bit later. Okay. So that would be how, and then that just kicks you straight out. Skipping back to my slide, we can see that there's a 5-step process here. So if you're doing a triage client, that will kick you out at step 3. So let's go and have a demonstration of the full 5-step process now. So this demonstration is if we have a client and they've had a service from us before, so they're an existing client, and we just want to enter a new service to our existing client. We can do that using the new intake process. So we'll just click new intake again to start another one. Okay, so this time I'm instead of entering a triage, I'm just going to say this is an information service. So I'm sure everyone knows what an information service is. Perhaps our client has called or come into the office and we have given them some information, maybe a flyer or something. Okay, so I'm going to enter this to an existing client. That person that we gave that flyer to is someone who has had services from us before. Okay. So we've just seen this process, so I'm just going to skip through step 1 pretty quickly. Excuse me while I skip through some of these steps. We've been over additional parties. I'll skip through to intake step 3. And I'll do my conflict check. And so this time, this demonstration is that we've got a client that's existing and we're just entering a new service to the client. So I've got this client here, use this client for demos. So I'm going to, that's actually selected that client for me already. If you found the one you want, you can simply click that box to say, this is the client we want. I'm just going to say this client ID is C509. We may see that again a bit later. Okay, so once we've selected the client that we need to select, we can say this is an existing client. If we haven't found the client, if they don't exist, we've done a conflict check and it's not the person, there may be some results, or if there are no results, or if there are results, but it's just not the person, you can click this is a new client. I'll come back to that in just a minute. This demonstration is entering a service for an existing client. Okay, so this is asking us, do we want to add the details into this client record as the primary details for this existing client? You don't have to do that. If you've got updated details, if the client has given you their new, whatever it be, email address, street address, home address, phone number, you can say yes and put those in as the primary details. I'm going to click no and save those as the additional details for that client because I don't want to overwrite what's already in the system in this case. Okay, so this is asking us for a result of the conflict check. So we just did one. This is now asking us to enter what was the result of that. And we're saying this is an existing client. You can make a note of that if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can just click Save and Close, and that will record that result of that conflict check. It may seem like a bit of overkill, but it's pretty quick. So it's also something you can't skip. Okay, so that has saved that service. So now we're at intake step 4. So now we're at step 4 of the process. Let me skip back to my slide. Okay, yep. So step 4 are the client details and step 5 are the service details. So once we come to step 4, these are the details of this client, and there's that client ID I was saying before. So we've just entered a new service to this client, and we've got all of our details, our client details in here. So then the next step in the process, and we can edit any of these details that we want. Actually, I will go through how you do that because some of it you can't do from here. So if you want to edit the name, any of the other client details, contact details like phone numbers, email addresses, residential addresses, then you need to click on additional details. So if you want to edit any of those, say that we've got the client's address is wrong, or the client has a new address, they've moved house, we can click new there to enter the new details in here, and we can say this is their home address, whatever it be, and we can just fill in the details. You can actually, let me just, I will demonstrate how you use this particular button we've got down here. So I've just selected this suburb from the drop-down list that I've got there, which is auto-fill the rest of these fields here. And then if you want to check if that is a real address or not, for whatever reason, you can click on that button to bring up a Google map, which will show you the cafe that I ate at a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, yeah, good food. Anyway, never mind that. So once we've done that, we've also got this here. I probably need to explain this to you. So this little checkbox primary, if you click that, that will overwrite what is on the client details screen. So this tab here, client, what you see in there for the, whether it be the residential address, email address, the client's name, or their phone numbers, the details that will appear on that client record are called the primary details. So if you tick that checkbox, that will overwrite what is currently in there. What is currently in there will then be placed in here in the additional details and be set as not the primary details for this client. I'm just going to leave that unticked for now. That doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's the additional details, and that's the client details, step 4 of the process. So to skip to step 5 of the intake process, the service details, you have to come over here to the client services. So if you click on the client services tab, that will bring you across to them, and we find one right at the top, which is highlighted in green. So anytime you see a service that is highlighted in green, that means that that service needs attention. There's something you need to do for that service, so you need to open the service by clicking on the service ID. and then having a look for what you need to do with this service. Most of the time, this is going to be required fields which have not been filled out because we didn't get a chance to do that in the new intake process. Okay, so once we open this, we'll find probably a bunch of fields that are required. I'm just going to go through them quickly. Please excuse me while I don't know, that might be about it. Anyway, if you do fill them out, you can simply click Save and Close, and I knew there were others. One's hiding there. We've just set up a bunch of dummy fields here, just ignore those. Once you've got everything filled out on the service screen that you need to fill out, you can simply click Save and Close. And that will bring you to the end of the 5-step new intake process. So we've just entered a service into the triage list for our new client. And then we've just added a service to an existing client, both using the new intake system. Okay, so as you can see, I just want to point out, the system doesn't change this highlighting once you fix this service. This is the new service we just entered. There's today, happy May Day, by the way. So this is one we just entered. It's still highlighted in green, and even if you click refresh, it won't remove that highlighting. It's really annoying. I might actually get that fixed. If we had enough people tell us that they want that fixed, we would probably get that done. Okay, now, so that's the full 5-step new intake process. Are there any questions about that before?
Yes. Hi, Sam. We've got a question. Does class automatically link the address to an associated LGA?
Yes. Yes, class is quite good at connecting addresses to not only LGAs, but all kinds of ABS data. So things like statistical areas, mesh blocks. I don't know them. I don't know too much about them. But yes, as soon as you enter that that address in, class will do its best to automatically add that to an LGA and all the other details, ABS details. Sometimes it doesn't work. We recommend trying to get your address as accurate as possible. If I can find one here. So this one here, 49 Katoomba Street, that's probably pretty good. If you wanted to really if you wanted to give class the best chance of being able to connect this with an LGA, I recommend doing a capitalized K and the S, and probably spelling this out as street rather than just ST. But things like unusual street names, or not street names, but names of roads and not roads either. Things like avenues, close, things like that. I recommend spelling those out as well as you can, because class does have a few issues trying to figure out exactly what the address is there. But we are working on that, and we're trying to get that working as well as possible. Okay, where's my slides? Yeah. Any other questions, by the way, Alex?
No, that's all we've got so far.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, let's move on to the alternate intake process. So there is another way to enter clients and services into class. There's a little bit of confusion around the sector about this process. Some centers are using it, which is fine. We don't officially recommend this system, but it is available to you, and you're welcome to use it if you want to. It seems to be the name that kind of confuses people. There are some centers who are using it, but don't kind of really realize that this is what we call the alternate intake process. Let's go and have a look at how it works. Okay, I'm just going to close that, and we've just logged into class, and we need to enter. Let's go back to our first demonstration. We've got someone who called up. We've asked them if they have had a service with us before. They said no. So we need to enter them as a new client. Okay, what we can do, and what a lot of centers do is simply click on search clients, and once that loads, you click on new, and you can just create a brand new client doing this. So this is what we call the alternate alternate intake process. Okay, so once this loads, you can just fill in all the details for your client. The ID is going to be auto-generated. You're going to be creating a full client or a non-client. We'll be going into that in a fair bit of detail next week if you want to know about those things. So you select your client type, and then you put in your name, not your name, the client's name. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, just what I seem to do every week. Okay, I'm going to skip most of these other details. You can put in notes, all that sort of stuff, income details, if you like. I'm not going to worry about any of that. This is essentially how you fill in a new client using the alternate intake system. Again, we've got some dummy fields here, ignore those as well. Once you've done that, you can click Save and Close, but I wouldn't recommend it because you probably want to enter a service to this brand new client you've just entered. The required fields again. I miss them so often. Anyway, doesn't matter. So once you click Save, we've just entered a new client into the system using the alternate intake method. And now we'll go and enter a service for that client, because there's probably not much point in having a client in the system if they haven't got any services attached to them. So once we enter our client in, we get the standard tabs up here, the documents, client audit. Again, we'll be going through all of that in more detail next week. Today, we're going to look at how we enter a service for this new client using the alternate intake method. You would click on the Client Services tab, then click on New. That will load a brand new service window or service page for you, and you enter the details for the service for this new client this way. I want to stop here and just say that the reason that this method of intake isn't recommended is that there's no conflict check included at any part of this process. So you need to remember to do your conflict checks yourself because it's not included as part of the process automatically. And we're reasonably well aware that some centres do occasionally forget to do their conflict checking. We are all human after all, and it can cause troubles. So that's why the new intake method is the officially recommended method. Okay, so we've got our service page here, and we can enter whatever information we want about this service that we are delivering. But that is essentially the alternate intake process. I'm just going through so I can just hit save and just run through the process in its entirety. Looks like I've got most of those required fields filled out. So once I've done that, I can simply click save. And that's pretty much the end of the alternate intake process, keeping in mind I'm not putting in any real data for this client. This is just this is all just dummy data. In fact, everything you're seeing in this version of class today is all dummy data. So obviously you would need to be entering real data, so things like addresses and date of births and service details and stuff. Okay, so that's essentially the alternate intake process. Okay, are there any questions about that before we move on?
Hi, Sam. No questions at this time, but if we have anything come through, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Alex. Where are my slides? Okay. Okay, so the triage system. Okay, so the triage system is only available through new intake. If you want to enter a service into the triage list, which will we'll be seeing in just a minute. You can only do that through new intake, just like we saw at the start of this session when I entered that service into Triage or into the Triage list using new intake. So we've already gone through creating a Triage service. So we'll get to converting a Triage service, but before we do that, I want to skip to adding data to a service or pretty much to a client. When you first enter them into the Triage list. Let me skip back to class and show you what I'm going on about. So going back to our first example, we had someone call up. They had never received a service from us before, so we put a new service into the Triage list for them. When you do that, I'll click on the new intake button there to bring up a new one. When you do that, there's not really the option to enter a whole bunch of the demographic information for this client. If you want to do that, and we recommend that you do that, and I will be talking about that a little bit later. So if you want to do all of that, so you can enter their address, and that's kind of where you're at. So if you just put someone into Triage and you want to enter more information about that client, this is how you do it. So you have to go to the Triage list. So click on Triage to open up your Triage list. And then you have to find your service that you just entered. A good way to do that is to find the open date of the service. 7th of, no, we're looking for but one, the 4th of the 5th, which is the one we just entered today. Quick flick through there. It will show me that there's no others. You could search for the date if you really wanted to. So this is the one we just entered. And I want to enter more information about the client than I did earlier in this training session. So I would click on that service ID to open that service. This will open the service page, and then from the service page, what we can do is open the client using this link here. So if we look in the basic data group of fields, we've got the client name right there, and right there is a link. This is not loading. We've got a link there with the client's name, which I'm going to click on as soon as this page loads properly. So now we can open the client page. So once the client page is open, then we can enter whatever data we want. So we can say we can enter the client's anything, any of this data we want. We can enter it in that way. You can click save and close once you're done, and that is how you enter your demographic data and further data for your client when you first enter them into the Triage list. Okay. All right. So that is. Let me just flip back to my slide. Adding data later. That's how you do it. So I'll now skip back to converting a service. Okay, so what I did was clicked on the Triage button to bring up the Triage list. I found the one I want. So this demonstration is, so the client has called up. They said they've never had a service from us before, so we put them into Triage, okay? So now we know what kind of service we'll be delivering to that client, or we may have already given them an advice or something like that. What we do is come into the Triage list, find our service, there it is, click the button. I'm not clicking that because it's just open right here. That will open the service for you. Then to convert that service is really pretty simple. You just change the service type. So we deliver the client a legal advice. You click that, you enter whatever other information about the service you want. Boy, there's going to be a bunch of required fields here. And then once you've done all of this, you click save. Give me a moment while I fill in all of this stuff. Yeah, okay, that might be most of it. No, it's not. Okay. So that is basically the Triage system in full. Conflict check. No, it isn't. I completely missed that. Okay. So that was a good this is why we have these pop-up things in class, and probably actually a great demonstration of how easy it is to forget to do something. And going back to what I was saying before, a lot of people, I don't know about a lot of people, but certainly some, forget to do their conflict checking, and I just did it right then. So to convert this service, class will only let you do that if you click the conflict check button. Okay, and once you do that, there's the name carried across, you run through the conflict check process, and we were saying this was a new client, so we just click the new client button. It'll ask us for a result of the conflict check. No, it doesn't ask us for that in that instance, or does it? I don't think it does. And it will then save that service. Okay, that is pretty much the full triage system and how it works. Okay, so there is actually one more thing. I will convert one more triage service. So I said that one was, this is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll just do it quickly anyway. That one was for a new client. If you want to add a service to an existing client into the triage list, you can absolutely do that and then convert that service to an existing client later on. Maybe your client had an advice from you 3 years ago, and now they've called up with a completely separate problem, and you haven't heard from them since, and you don't really know what this new issue is. So you put them into the triage list, and they've now seen their solicitor who delivered them a legal advice, but this is to an existing client who had that one other legal advice service we delivered to them 3 years ago, required fields. Anyway, you will run through the process. Oh no, I better run through it and show you. These required fields are a little annoying, but this will only take me a few more seconds. Okay, let's try that now. There it is. Okay, so that will bring the name over. That's fine. We click search. We haven't got any results. What you will do is click existing client. It will then say you need to select one from the list. We haven't got one, so that wasn't a very good demonstration. Apologies for that. But then you can just add that service to an existing client if you want, and that will then appear in that client's list of services. Okay, that is about the full triage system. Do we have any questions about triage?
Yes, we do. Can you delete a new client triage?
I'm not actually sure of the answer to that. Delete a new client triage. It looks as though you can. I'm guessing, I'm kind of guessing here that the question is, can we delete one of these services in triage? And that I'm guessing the example is that we've got a new client who's called up, we put them into triage, and maybe they called up and said, don't worry about it, I don't need assistance anymore. So we want to delete this service. You can just select whichever one you want to delete. Click the delete button. It'll give you this asking, are you sure you want to do this? You click yes, and that should delete that service for you. And this is telling us the client is now gone as well. I hope that answers that question. If not, let me know. That may take a little while to come through, so perhaps I should skip on unless there are any other questions.
Yes, we've had a question come through. Is there a dummy class system we can practice on?
Yes, there absolutely is. Thank you for asking. I could show you where it is. The way to get the login details for this system, I'm just going to copy this URL. I'm going to paste it in there. I'm not going to click go because it's not there. So it's center-UAT, hit enter. So this is the sandbox or test environment for class. It's not labeled that well. The only difference you'll see is that it says UAT version 2.1, whereas the login screen for the proper version of class, the live version of class, will say something like version 2.3 or something. your usernames and passwords won't work in here. If you want those usernames and passwords, contact us at the help desk. We send them out to every person that asks for them. And you can play around in that system as much as you like. We encourage everyone to go in there and try and break it as much as you can. That will then inform us of what needs to be fixed. So thanks for that question. Any other questions?
Just going back to the previous, can you delete a new client triage? Does the client ID number, so if you were to delete a triage client,
Mm-hmm.
the entire client, does the client ID number go back into the system for reuse, or is that client ID then number then deleted? And so say for instance it was C509 and you deleted C509, would the next time you put in a triage client take
Would
the
that be?
C509, or would it go to C510?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. I don't know the answer to that. Alex, could we get some contact details for that person, because I don't really have time to test it right now, but it will only take me a few minutes to test that later on, and we can probably get an answer to that person later today or maybe tomorrow.
Certainly, no worries.
Thank you very much, Alex. Any other questions?
That's all I've got for now, and thank you for showing how to get into the UAT system.
Yeah, thanks for those questions too. Okay, that's the full triage system. Okay, so to end this session, I'd like to talk about data collection and reasons why it's important. So the reason why collecting data is important is that it helps all of us. That's a really simplistic way to explain it. To go through it in a bit more detail, we analyze the data that you put into class, and then we use that, we aggregate it. We then use that data to advocate for the sector. And there's some of the data that's really quite important, and we'd really like you to collect it as well as you possibly can. And I will show you exactly what that data is now. There are 5 fields in class that we really want you to collect. And I'll show you which ones they are now. There they are there. If you wanted to screenshot that for future reference, feel free. I'm going to jump back over to class in a minute. If anyone does want a screenshot of that and they haven't gotten it by the time I flick back to class, let us know and I'll flick back to this slide so you can get it. Okay, so if I go to a client page, we've got the ATSI status. I filled that one in before because this is one of the fields we would really like you to collect on every single client. We're very much realistic, and we know that we're never going to get 100% accurate data collection across the sector. We just want to push it up as much as possible, which is why I'm bringing this to your attention today. So this is one of the fields, the ATSI status field. If you can collect that on every client, that would be very much appreciated. And there are a bunch of options in here. So sometimes it may not be relevant, or perhaps it might not be culturally appropriate to ask your client of their ATSI status, which is why we have unknown, not stated or inadequately described as an option. If that is the relevant option to select on this field, by all means select that, and that is far better for us than leaving that field blank. We'd much rather you put in unknown than to leave that field blank. Okay, I'll jump over to a service page and hope that this is jumping around on me. Okay, so on the service page, there's a bunch of information as well. So if I scroll down to these service characteristics, these top 3, the financial disadvantage indicator, the family violence indicator, and the homelessness status. So financial disadvantage, and all 3 of these fields are really quite complex. Financial disadvantage indicator, again, for all 3 of these fields, it may not be appropriate at all to ask your client about this. If there are centres out there who want help with scripts, asking your client, so you just have a piece of paper or something on your computer and you just read it out for each of your clients, we're more than willing to help you with some scripts to read out to your clients so that you can get this data in a much more culturally safe way. There are some centres out there who are doing this really quite well, and we want to spread that information throughout the sector. So the financial disadvantage indicator, it may not be appropriate to ask your client. It may not be applicable. This service may have nothing to do with finances, and it may have nothing to do with the financial status of your client. So you can simply select not applicable if that's the case. Family violence indicator, this is one of the trickiest fields in class. Family violence is pretty widespread throughout the country. Unfortunately, I won't go into my personal feelings on that. We found that oftentimes solicitors, when they're speaking with clients, may have a client say something to them along the lines of that there's some coercion at home. That's family violence, and you should be entering that into the system as family violence. Again, if you want help being able to fill out that field more accurately, we'd be more than willing to help you understand the depth of family violence and what constitutes family violence, and how to fill out that field more accurately. Homelessness status, your client may say to you, no, I'm not homeless, but they may be couch surfing, sleeping in their car rather than sleeping rough, something like that. That could constitute homelessness. Again, these fields, we'd really like it if you can collect these as much as possible. And then the last one I want to speak to you about today, I believe, is it's at the top here, I think, referral information. Service details. No, here it is here. Okay, so this is also one of the most important fields in class. So if we have a look at the left side here, we've got the basic data group of fields, the service details field, and below that the referral fields. So there's a bunch of fields in here, and the important one is reason for referral. So if you're doing services for a client, there could be anything like even an advice. Maybe it's a rep service or something, and as part of that rep service, you referred this client to, for instance, a mental health something or other. Enter that in here. We'd really like it if you could fill in the reason for referral every time you're filling in any referral details for all of your services, whether that service be a referral service or another type of service. Please let us know the reasons why you are referring someone. And there's one main reason why we would like that. It's because one of the options in here can really, really help us advocate for the sector. This is possibly the most important thing that will help us to advocate for the sector, and that is centre does not have capacity to deliver service. Every year we do a bit of a roundup around the sector, and we go out with some information to the public saying that the community legal sector helped out however many hundreds of thousands of Australians this year. But we also, every time we do that, we're also saying, well, there were also this many hundreds of thousands of Australians that we couldn't help, that we had to turn away. And so the way that we get those numbers is through this. Centre does not have capacity to deliver service. So if the reason that you're referring a client onto someone else is that every one of your solicitors is fully booked up and doesn't have the capacity to take another client, use this reason for referral. Centre does not have capacity to deliver service, and we'll count up how many of those there are, and then that helps us go out and advocate to say the sector doesn't have enough funding, essentially. So that's a really important field, the reason for referral, and that particular option there, one of the most important options in all of class. Okay, So thanks for listening to me go on about data collection and the reasons why it's important. I hope you've gotten something out of that. I think that just about covers data collection. So I might pause again to ask if there are any questions about that or anything else I've covered today.
Sorry, thanks, Sam. We did have a question come through earlier, but it looks like it might need to be referred to the help desk. But just in case, you can demonstrate or share your knowledge. Occasionally, when entering further information into a client, for example, from Triage, there will be a street address that is set to primary without a street address or any information actually inputted, with no way to select or delete it. Have you come across this error before?
No, I haven't. No, I'm not aware of that one. I think my recommendation would be to just add the client's address if you've got it, and mark it as primary. And then if that blank one, by the sounds of it, yeah, I'm not sure what's quite happening there. It does sound strange. If we could get contact details for that person as well, because I'd like to look into that as well. Are there any other questions?
That's all for now, and I'll definitely send those along to you.
Great, thank you very much, Alex. Okay, yeah, that's about it for today. I'll go through the usual stuff I do at the end of all of these sessions. Getting help, if you need help with anything in class or anything else community legal related, you can contact us on the help desk. We've got this button here at the top right, the help button there, a little circle with a question mark in it. If you click on that, that will bring up our website, which has details of our new class Helpdesk Portal right there. This is a link. Once this loads properly, I will open that. There we go. Okay. There are other ways to get help on or from the help desk as well as the portal. And if you want to find those, you look in this navigation menu on the right hand side here and look for help and support. That's the one I need, and I'll click on that. While that's loading, I might skip across to the Helpdesk Portal, which looks like this. You can keep track of your requests using that button there. And as you can see, I don't have any because it doesn't really matter why won't that go back or go out of there now. Anyway, you can use the create a request. And then you can just, once you click on that, then you can just type in help, I need help with triage. That's not how I misspelled triage, I think probably about 99% of the time. Anyway, see, if you did that, you might say, well, class help with customer portal, not sure how to do something or require an explanation. That might be what you want. You might click on, I need some clarification. It might be another issue. Click on whatever you need and you can create a ticket on our help desk that way and fill in whatever you have for us there. You could also email us if you don't want to use the portal. You don't have to. You can use good old-fashioned email. Back on our website, we've got the help and support page here, and there's our email address. Email us at the help desk at this email address there, icthelp@clcs.org.au. You can also give us a phone call on this phone number there. And if you do leave us a voicemail on that, if you can't get through and you leave us a voicemail, we listen to all of those voicemails and we will attempt to call you back if you leave a number. So we've also got information on our website about our upcoming training sessions. So again, in this menu, you click on training. And then once that loads, you go to the class training schedule, and that will give you the information of our upcoming training sessions. That's not loading, is it? There we go. That might help if I click on that properly. Okay, and here's our class training schedule. Right at the top there, we've got a big button up for the videos of our previous training sessions. I'll come back to it. This is the one, that's the one we did last week. I've been a bit slack in not taking these off the system. Never mind that. This is the one we're doing today, and this is the one I've mentioned a couple of times. Different types of clients. This is what we go through next week. Different types of clients, how to create, edit, and copy services, actions, probably having a pretty deep dive into actions, and you can register for that if you like. If you work in accountability, you can get a refresher on that if you want to on the 18th of May. And we've got a bunch of videos if you want training and it's not coming up in the near future. You could watch the training videos that we've got, which are reasonably up to date. Some of them not super up to date, but pretty close to it. And we've got a bunch of stuff there. The new features session we did recently for all the new features we've just rolled out in class. We've got our new user and general user training session there. That's about 2 hours long, but if you have staff who are just starting with you and you need them to know how to use class, you can sit them in front of that video and hurt their brain for a bit, but sometimes it has to be done. The other thing we have is our series of webinars. We're calling them Emergence, our stories in the next decade. And this was brought about because of the pandemic and the effect that had on the national conference that we used to have every year, but couldn't do so because of border closures and whatnot. So leading up to our next national conference, we've got this series of webinars and events. If you want to see what the upcoming webinars are, there they are there in that link. Excuse me. And this month we're running a series of events around ICT. So there is one there on insurance, and then we've got a demonstration of a CMS called Action Step, which you could use to plug into class if you wanted. There's a demonstration of that coming up. And then this one's also not ICT related, but there are 1 or 2 of those happening this month. So that about brings us to the end of our training session today. Let me skip back to my slides and put this up and say thanks for being a part of this session. We like delivering class training, sharing our knowledge, and helping the sector use this system better with the intention of being able to deliver social justice a bit better, hopefully. Okay, I might throw to Alex just really quickly one more time to ask if there are any other questions I could field right now.
Hey Sam, no questions at the moment. Thanks to everyone who sent you questions through. We got some really good ones today. And if you have any following this session, please do get in touch with us on the help desk.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thanks to everyone for being a part of this class training session today. This video should be up on the website within about a week. Okay, bye from us at CLCs Australia, and have a nice afternoon.